Hello, folks. So it is in fact Terra Nova Tuesday, and we will be doing a third piece in the Newfoundland Political Studies series. I chose to do this particular piece on the Dominion of Newfoundland, mostly because it will come in very relevant in the future when I start talking about the pre-Confederation various political parties and governance of the time. And of course, I just want to put my face on screen for just a moment to say thank you very much for being here. I am rapidly approaching my 500th video, and that's assuming, counting shorts, lives, and various other things, I have not already exceeded that number. I'm also not including the Rumble exclusives in that. I would very much appreciate you having a look at my Rumble channel. It is monetized, and I am already accruing a small amount of revenue from that. Excuse me. It's early morning, and I'm not long awake. In fact, to the point that I'm going to mute this. And attempt to correct some of the sinus issues I'm having. I've altered the position of my camera a little bit for this stream. For this video. And I'm currently messing with another product that I use quite a lot. Let me see. Yes. Hulls. Which you can't really see. There we go. They're not a sponsor of the channel. I'd happily take a sponsorship from Hulls. It's a product I use and trust. So these are the honey-flavored drops from Hulls. I find them very pleasant and very effective. And they are, in fact, a lovely honey color. But again, not a sponsor. And I do believe they are made with real honey, so if you have an allergy, be aware of that. And that went exactly where I wanted it to. So before I get started on this, I just want to bring up a page from Newfoundland and Labrador tourism, I think. Let me just end the page here for this and see what I've got. This is, in fact, Newfoundland and Labrador Tourism has put this out, which isn't much of a surprise considering that's a, how to put it? Well, it would be part of the captured institutions that are ignoring the actual heritage and history of the province. This paragraph, of course, is a very simplified piece of, I suppose it would be fair to call it propaganda, being that it's supposed to be tourist information. However, there is a glaring inaccuracy in it. And, of course, it begins talking about the unique culture of Newfoundland, which is a product of English, Irish, French, some Dutch and Scottish, and Indigenous heritage. And the history is rich with stories and legends, explorers and inventors, amongst other things. Rogues and raconteurs, not least amongst them. And, of course, it starts off with a very long piece about, or rather, not so long, a piece about the past. For thousands of years, indigenous groups such as the Maritime Archaic Indians and the Paleo Eskimo hunted, fished, and settled in the province, mostly in the southern Labrador area. Not necessarily solidly confirmed that they were even on the island. The Vikings have been confirmed to have visited here at the beginning of the last millennium, but European visitation didn't begin in earnest until John Cabot's voyage in 1497. that we know of. This is one of the issues. Oh, sorry, just a moment. This is one of the issues that I have with a lot of things that talk about Newfoundland. Now, granted, this is just a piece of relatively unimportant tourist propaganda, but it should be noted that we have no idea how many European visits may have occurred between when the Vikings were provably here in roughly 1000 AD and when Cabot came in 1497, about 500 years later. But just to return to this, and of course it does mention Cabot's voyage in 1497, there were initially annual visits, and French and English colonies were eventually created in the province, which led to a degree of conflict. Newfoundland was actually one of the prizes that was fought over quite regularly. I believe the Treaty of Utrecht is one of the ones that had to do with Newfoundland. And let me just do a quick search on that. And search. Okay, so the treaty recognized Queen Anne as the sovereign of England, officially ended French support for the Jacobites. Territorially, it created major concessions by France in North America. France agreed to return the entire Hudson Bay area. In addition, France agreed to cede all claims to Newfoundland and to evacuate its base at Plaisance, now known as Placentia, although French fishermen retained certain rights on the coasts. Let me see, Acadia also was mentioned here. Let me see if there's any other mention of Newfoundland. No, only the two. Not much of a surprise, really. But to return to the piece of tourist propaganda, here's one of the issues I have. The English colony included St. John's, one of the oldest cities in North America. As far as I know, it is the oldest city in North America. No, actually, I may have that incorrect. But it does have interesting architecture. This is where I have the issue with the historicity. It says that Newfoundland and Labrador remained under British rule until joining Canada in 1949. As you will see in this piece, that is not even close to accurate. And in fact, I do believe, there we are, okay, I had the wrong article I was trying to bring up. But Newfoundland, in fact, for, if I recall correctly, close to 100 years, was self-governing under the British Dominion system. So we will have a look quickly at this piece from Wikipedia. Before I do that, though, I do want to talk about the Newfoundland Dominion flag. And I have to remind myself what the slogan means. Haec tibi dona ferro. If I recall correctly, that means what gifts we bring. But I'm not 100% certain. Okay. It translates as, these gifts I bring thee. And, yes. So this would have been the seal of Newfoundland as a dominion. Let me just bring that up a little closer. In fact, I should be able to bring that significantly closer. And there you go. So, either hike or hake. I haven't heard this pronounced personally before. Haec tibi dona ferro. And it translates to, these gifts I bring thee. If I recall correctly, these are meant to be Mercury and Britannia. I'm not certain who this individual here is supposed to be. probably some poor bugger who got shanghaied. Of course, I don't necessarily mean that completely, but in any case, we will return to the Wikipedia article on the Dominion of Newfoundland. Newfoundland was a British dominion in eastern North America, today the modern Canadian province of Newfoundland and Labrador. It was established on 26 September 1907 and confirmed by the Balfour Declaration of 1926 and the Statute of Westminster of 1931. It included the island of Newfoundland and Labrador on the continental mainland. I'll just show you, if I can, where Labrador is. It's not a great image. Newfoundland was one of the original dominions within the meaning of the Balfour Declaration and accordingly enjoyed a constitutional status equivalent to the other dominions of the time. And just to have a quick look at the Balfour Declaration, this was issued by the 1926 Imperial Conference of British Empire Leaders in London, named for Arthur Balfour, then Lord President of the Council. It declared the UK and the Dominions to be autonomous communities within the British Empire, equal in status, in no way subordinate one to another in any aspect of their domestic or external affairs, though united by a common allegiance to the Crown being the state in all its aspects within the jurisprudence of the Commonwealth realms and their subdivisions, and freely associated as members of the British Commonwealth of Nations, generally referred to these days as the Commonwealth. And at the time, at least as far as this is concerned, 56 member states, though I do believe at least a couple of states have since left the Commonwealth. So just to have a quick look here, I'd like to see which countries were part of the Commonwealth, but I guess I'm going to have to do that in a quick search. And I would like to know which ones were members of the Commonwealth during the period when it was founded. My apologies, I had a cough moment there and had to mute. So on this window, keep forgetting I have to close the other one. The Commonwealth is one of the world's oldest associations of sovereign states. But with this, what we're looking for is quick facts. I want to know, really? Does this not want to give me a list of Commonwealth nations? There we are. Founder member countries. 8 countries came together to form the modern Commonwealth: Australia, Canada, India, New Zealand, Pakistan, South Africa, Sri Lanka, and the United Kingdom. I don't think that's necessarily true, or 100% correct, because if I recall correctly, Pakistan was not its own country until sometime after the war, the Second World War. Let me see if it actually will let me know that. And I do apologize, I know this is a bit of a deep dive that we weren't really looking for. World's 5th most populous country, interesting. Second largest Muslim population. Let's see here. Site of several ancient cultures. Here we are. Spurred by the Pakistan movement, which sought a homeland for the Muslims of British India, and election victories in 46, Pakistan gained independence in 47, after the partition of the British Indian Empire. So, in other words, Pakistan should not have been considered a founding member of the British Commonwealth, given that the Commonwealth was established in 1926. And just to confirm that, we'll go back to the other screen. And this has redirected me from British Commonwealth of Nations to Commonwealth of Nations, which of course is a lovely piece of white erasure, but we won't talk about that. So there are 56 member states currently. However, I would like to know the founding states. Leaders, establishment. There's also the London Declaration of 1949, which established the current Commonwealth of Nations. Okay, so the history. Actually, membership should give us what we're looking for. Okay, so several different documents have been used to establish criteria. And apparently there was a third or fourth declaration in Singapore in 71, which has dedicated all members to the principles of world peace, liberty, human rights, equality, and free trade. One more thing that Trudeau isn't paying attention to. But let's not get that modern political right now. New members. There's 9. Rwanda became the second Commonwealth member admitted not to have any constitutional links to Britain. So apparently even the failing standards have continued. Okay, this is becoming extremely difficult to... okay. Let's try this a little differently. And try asking the question, what countries were part of the Commonwealth in 1926? There we are. That's a much better question to ask. And one thing I will point out, it is actually extremely important in the age of digital information, when you can get inundated with a pile of irrelevancies, to know which question you need to ask. So the 1926 Imperial Conference was attended by the leaders of Australia, Canada, India, the Irish Free State, Newfoundland, New Zealand, and South Africa. So these would have been the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 founding member countries. Unfortunately, I've closed the Balfour link. Let me just see if I can find that again. Okay, here's the Balfour Declaration. So the Inter-Imperial Relations Committee, chaired by Balfour, this individual here. Nice mustache. Not that I have any sort of personal stake in mustaches, of course. The declaration accepted the growing political and diplomatic independence of the Dominions in the years after World War I. It also recommended that the Governors-General, the representatives of the King in each Dominion, should no longer also serve automatically as representative of the British government. Now, this is talking about the establishment of the Commonwealth. The Dominion itself was extant a little earlier, 1907. And in fact, I think we had essentially been de facto self-governing from sometime in the late 1800s. And of course, because you cannot allow a conquered nation to forget that they've been humiliated, the very first sentence of the body of the entry talks about how in 1934 Newfoundland became the only dominion to give up its self-governing status, which ended 79 years of self-government. So 34 minus 79, 80 would be 64, so 1865 to 1934. Just checking something, but if I recall correctly, Texas was independent in 1865. Let's see here. 1865 was the end of the Civil War era. Okay. So the Republic of Texas was actually extant 20 years earlier. It ended its period of independence and sovereignty. But just to get back on topic, the abolition of self-government came about because of a crisis in Newfoundland's public finances in 1932. That is correct, but does not tell the entire story, of course. Newfoundland had accumulated significant debt by building a railway across the island, which was absolutely necessary, which was completed in the 1890s, and by raising its own regiment during World War I. Now, I will open that link because I do believe the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, also known as the Blue Puttees, deserves to be recognized as well. They have been active currently since 1949. They were active for the Second World War and the First World War. These two dates do not make sense if you look at the fact that it raised its own regiment during World War I. Then these numbers make no sense. I assume this is simply talking about who they would have been serving, but it's not correct, or not 100% correct. The War of 1812 would have seen not a single engagement for Newfoundland as far as I would know. I believe that was entirely a mainland. In any case, the Newfoundland Regiment will be a topic for another time. How am I doing for time? I'm already up to 20 minutes. I don't intend to go much further, to be honest. In any case, looking at the history, so it's called a unitary parliamentary constitutional monarchy. I'm not quite sure what unitary means. Unitary state is a sovereign state governed as a single entity in which the central government is the supreme authority. Okay, in other words, it was a monarchy with a parliament. The currency was the Newfoundland dollar. At various times in the past, I have been fortunate enough to get my hands on old Newfoundland currency, and I do very much wish I had kept the few pieces that had come to me. Unfortunately, I did not. In my youth, I wasn't particularly enamored of the past. And I think, unfortunately, for the most part, I do dislike how the Newfoundland Parliament is being depicted using Confederation building, when it should in fact be this building. And I'll just bring that up. Today this building is known as the Newfoundland Archives, or houses the Newfoundland Archives. Let me just get this open properly. Interesting. Why is that so small? Okay, we will do it this way then. Here. Okay, so this building is the Colonial Building in St. John's. As far as I know, it continues to house the Newfoundland Archives, and this would have been the government building during the colonial era, or during the Dominion era, rather. I think it's a beautiful old building. Unfortunately, it used to have some very, very large trees on the grounds, and during a period that I lived in St. John's, these trees were cut down and, as far as I know, simply disposed of, which to me was a bit of a tragedy. I don't know that there was ever an opportunity given to the people of the province to oppose this, and I would have far preferred that those trees remain and obscure the view from the road. I don't know why old trees suddenly seem like they're not worth having there. But in any case, back to this article. And I do realize I am rambling a little bit. I do apologize. I am a little bit tired, a little bit awake, I suppose. Okay, so we will talk briefly. And yes, there was a 6-member commission of government that ended up recommending Newfoundland join Canada. And the votes and things we will talk about in future pieces. The official name of the Dominion was Newfoundland, and not, as was sometimes reported, Dominion of Newfoundland. The distinction is apparent in many statutes, most notably the Statute of Westminster, which was 1931, and that set the basis for the relationship between the Commonwealth countries and the Crown. And it listed the full name of each realm, including the, quote, Dominion of New Zealand, the, quote, Dominion of Canada, and, quote, Newfoundland. Because nobody really dominated Newfoundland. And, of course, we have the Blue Ensign, which was the colonial flag from 1870 to 1904, the Red Ensign, which was the civil flag from 07 to 31, the Union flag, which was the official flag from 31 to 49 when we joined Canada, and continued as the provincial flag until, I believe, 1980. And you will note also that nowhere in that list of flags do you see a pink, white, and green tricolor. That's because that was never an official flag of Newfoundland. The anthem of the Dominion was the Ode to Newfoundland, which I have done a video on before. I did a recitation, actually, on a Wednesday reading. That was written by the colonial governor Sir Cavendish Boyle in 1902. A little piece of Newfoundland trivia for you that you may not be aware of. It was his wife, Lady Boyle, I don't remember her first name, who, with the intent to disparage our people, said that you will be able to recognize the Newfoundlanders in heaven because they're going to be the ones who want to go home. That's how much we love this place. And in 1980, the province readopted the song as provincial anthem. I'm not sure what the anthem would have been from 49 to 80 now. It's interesting. We actually are, in fact, the only province in Canada to have a provincial anthem. The Ode to Newfoundland continues to be heard at public events in the province. However, only the first and last verses are traditionally sung. The entire song should be sung, in my opinion, as it is a very, very beautiful piece of poetry. In 1854, the British government established Newfoundland's responsible government. In 1855, Philip Francis Little, a native of Prince Edward Island, won a parliamentary majority over Sir Hugh Hoyles and the Conservatives. Little formed the first administration from 55 to 58. Newfoundland rejected confederation with Canada in 1869. Sir John Thompson, Prime Minister of Canada, came very close to negotiating our entry in 1892. We remained a colony until 1907, when the Imperial Conference resolved to confer Dominion status on all self-governing colonies in attendance. The annual holiday of Dominion Day was celebrated each 26th September to commemorate the occasion. Here in Newfoundland, I do not believe Dominion Day continues to be celebrated, if I recall correctly. It has been changed to something else these days. Let me see. Okay, I'm not really getting a good result there, so I'm just going to move along. Political origins, First World War and afterwards. Now, this is actually something I wanted to bring up. The talk about the financial crisis that happened in Newfoundland after the building of the railroad and the raising of the regiment for World War I. It should also be noted that the colony of Newfoundland, when we were under, let's call it British administration, under the commission government, we raised over £1 million and sent to the British war effort, on top of actually raising our own regiments. None of that money was ever given back. So it's not much of a shock that we were impoverished and forced to consider joining Canada. Yeah. It's a great way to get out of your debts. And this is a map of Newfoundland in 1912. You'll see here there's a very thin slice of coastline here. That is the border discrepancy between Labrador and Quebec, which was eventually settled in Newfoundland's favor by the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council in 1927, although Quebec has not accepted that outcome. Quebec still continues to believe that they own Labrador. I would suggest that it would be a bad choice for them to attempt to assert that claim. My apologies for the little bit of dead air there. Again, I had a cough. Newfoundland's own regiment, the 1st Newfoundland Regiment, also known as the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, fought in the First World War. Again, I will cover the Newfoundland Regiment in another... just open that in a new tab there. Pull that down to a Tuesday. And that can sit there. I will be covering the history of the Newfoundland Regiment in a future video. On the 1st of July 1916, the German army wiped out most of the regiment at Beaumont-Hamel on the first day of the Battle of the Somme. 90% casualties. Yet the regiment went on to serve with distinction in several subsequent battles, earning the prefix Royal. Despite people's pride in the accomplishments of the regiment, Newfoundland's war debt and pension responsibility for the regiment and the cost of maintaining a trans-island railway led to increased and ultimately unsustainable government debt in the post-war era. Well, yes, when the Crown refuses to repay the donations of its dominions. Yeah, that's not much of a shock. After the war, Newfoundland, along with the other dominions, sent a separate delegation to the Paris Peace Conference, but, unlike the others, Newfoundland neither signed the Treaty of Versailles in her own right, nor sought separate membership in the League of Nations. Curiously. In the 1920s, political scandals racked the Dominion. In 1923, the Attorney General arrested Newfoundland's Prime Minister Sir Richard Squires on charges of corruption. Despite his release soon after on bail, a commission of inquiry headed by Thomas Hollis Walker, KC, that would be King's Counsel, reviewed the scandal. Soon after, the Squires government fell. Whether Squires was actually guilty or not, one is not mentioned here. Squires returned to power in 1928 because of the unpopularity of his successors, the pro-business Walter Stanley Monroe and, briefly, Frederick Alderdice, Monroe's cousin, but found himself governing a country suffering from the Great Depression. So, yeah, not a lot of good going on anywhere in the world at that time. The Judicial Committee of the Privy Council resolved Newfoundland's long-standing Labrador boundary dispute with Canada to the satisfaction of Newfoundland and against Canada. Excuse me. And in particular, contrary to the wishes of Quebec, the province that borders Labrador, on the 1st of April, 1927. Another little piece of Newfoundland trivia for you. The date April 1st is somewhat relevant to Newfoundland politics and especially Newfoundland political history because those of you who are keen on provincial histories for the country will remember that it was March 31st, 1949, when Newfoundland joined Canada. The reason for this being that the greatest influence on us joining Canada, Joey Smallwood, yeah, it's a name I don't like to say. I'll cover him in another video as well, assuming I haven't already. But it'll probably be titled something along the lines of the biggest villain to ever walk out of Newfoundland. Anyway, moving along. Smallwood pushed to have the documents signed on the 31st rather than the 1st of April, as he did not want that to be associated with April Fools, for whatever reason. I don't think good sense would have dictated that being an issue. In any case, we're left to see that the 1st of April does in fact end up being somewhat relevant to a lot of Newfoundland political history. Anyway, back to this. Prior to 1867, the Quebec North Shore portion of the Labrador coast had shuttled back and forth between the colonies of Lower Canada and Newfoundland. Maps up to 1927 showed the coastal region as part of Newfoundland with an undefined boundary. The Privy Council ruling established a boundary along the drainage divide. That's not much help. Separating waters that flowed through the territory to the Labrador coast, although following two straight lines from the Romaine River along the 52nd parallel, then south near 57 degrees. This is unimportant detail at this point. Newfoundland only gradually implemented its status as a self-governing dominion. In 21, it officially established a position of High Commissioner to the UK, for which Sir Edgar Rennie Bowring had already assumed the role in 1918, and it adopted a national flag and established an External Affairs Department in 1931, after it had given its assent for the passage of the Statute of Westminster in 31 as well. Let me just collapse this category. The end of responsible government. And here we see the colonial building again. What pops up there? Let me just see if I can't get you a better view of that. There we go. That is a beautiful old building as far as I'm concerned. It's one of my favorite sites to see in St. John's. As a small country which relied primarily upon the export of fish, paper, and minerals, Newfoundland was hit very hard by the Great Depression. Something that just struck me here as well. Newfoundland has always relied on exports. One of the issues I have with this is that, and this continues to be a problem for many people in the province, we've never really established processing here on the island. We did have it for a while with the Come By Chance oil refinery. But as far as I'm aware, the expected smelters and various other refineries and refining facilities for things like minerals and lumber, etc., have really never materialized. And really, this is one of the things that many Newfoundlanders, myself included, think is a grievous error on the part of government. We should have been doing as much processing as possible on our own soil. And with the supply chain issues of the last few years, it's become quite obvious that that would have been the sensible step. Let's see. Economic frustration combined... Oh, yes. Newfoundland was hit very hard by the Great Depression. We were probably not hit as badly in terms of the rural people, because rural people at that point were still taking great care of themselves. Economic frustration combined with anger over government corruption led to a general dissatisfaction with democratic government. On the 5th of April, there's early April again, a crowd of 10,000 marched on the colonial building and forced Prime Minister Squires to flee. Squires lost an election held later in 32. The next government, led once more by Alderdice, called upon the British government to take direct control until Newfoundland could become self-sustaining. So, there's another name we can add to the pile of infamy. Alderdice. I suspect I'll have to do a piece on him as well. That's Frederick J. Alderdice. The F word comes to mind quite quickly when I think of many people like that. Okay. And you too get thrown into the pile of Newfoundland stories that I will be covering later. Okay. Where was I? Alderdice. There we go. The UK, concerned over Newfoundland's likelihood of defaulting on its war debt payments, debt that was acquired helping you, established the Newfoundland Royal Commission, headed by a Scottish peer, First Baron Amory. Its report, in 33, assessed Newfoundland's political culture as intrinsically corrupt and its economic prospects as bleak, and advocated the abolition of government and its replacement by a commission. Acting on the report's recommendations, Alderdice's own government voted itself out of existence in December 1933. Yeah. Gotta love Newfoundland politicians. In 1934, the Dominion suspended Newfoundland's self-governing status and the Commissioner government took control. Newfoundland remained in Dominion in name only. Newfoundland was ruled by a governor who reported to the Colonial Secretary in London, and the legislature was suspended. So in other words, we weren't even making our own laws anymore. I thought it was bad enough when we had Ottawa making laws for Newfoundland. Given Newfoundland's strategic location in the Battle of the Atlantic, that's not much of a help. The Allies, especially the U.S., built many military bases here. There were... I'm not certain how many military bases were actually constructed in Newfoundland. I'm aware of Argentia and Fort Pepperell as well. Let's see, here we are, the American presence. They also established a base in Stephenville. Under its leased base, sorry, I should put that on screen for you guys. Under its leased bases agreement with Britain, the U.S. had obtained permission in 1941 to establish military bases in Newfoundland in exchange for 50 destroyers. Prior to that, the U.S. had avoided any involvement in the war, having suffered heavy casualties during the First World War. However, with the fall of France in 1940, the American government recognized a need for additional bases to better defend the Western Hemisphere. Ironically, those American bases didn't actually see any action, as far as I am aware, whereas Belle Island actually did. And if I recall correctly, they saw off at least one U-boat, possibly 2 or 3. It's been a while since I looked at that information as well. And I'm well over 40 minutes here. Let's see. American troops arrived in St. John's in January 1941. In the months following, Newfoundland became one of the most highly militarized places in North America, as more than $100 million was spent to build military bases in St. John's, that's Fort Pepperell, Argentia, which remains Argentia, and Stephenville. American detachments were also stationed alongside Canadian troops at Gander and Goose Bay airfields, as well as in a number of smaller communities of strategic importance. Sandy Cove and St. Bride's, for example, radar sites were used. Back to this. My apologies. I've been talking for a while, and it's beginning to take a toll. But now that we've come to the Second World War, I think we've pretty much reached the end of the discussion. But this does bear note. As soon as prosperity returned during the war, agitation began to end the commission. Newfoundland, with a population of 313,000, with 5,200 in Labrador, seemed too small to be independent. That's interesting because our population was smaller before. And, yeah, we were independent, no problem. In 1945, I'll bring that back up, sorry. In 1945, London announced that a Newfoundland National Convention, I'll open that link in a new window, or new tab rather, announced that a Newfoundland National Convention would be elected to advise on what constitutional choices should be voted on by referendum. Union with the United States was a possibility, but Britain rejected the option and instead offered 2, return to Dominion or continuation of the unpopular commission. Canada cooperated with Britain to ensure that the option of closer ties with America was not on the referendum. Gee, I'm surprised Wikipedia even put that in this article. That's, and it does say citation needed. I do believe there are a number of records pointing that out, letters and various other things. But in any case, it's very clear that between Britain and Canada, the last thing they wanted was to have the Americans take Newfoundland. More likely than not, if there was some sort of election fortification around the referendum result, it would have been with the intent to prevent independence, or which would have been a return to Dominion status, in the fear that we might have joined the Americans. personally, my thinking is that had we been able to reacquire Dominion status and return to independence, we probably would have kept it. But who knows? And hey, joining the U.S. seems to have worked out pretty well for Texas. Anyway, in any case, folks, that's going to be it for this little piece. I'll throw the thumbnail back up for just a moment. And thank you very much for your time. It's been 45 minutes of me kind of waffling about. But at the end of the day, this is going to be very useful information for future political pieces that I do. And it has actually provided me with several links and connections that I would like to follow later. Sorry, I've just noticed a link for Joey Smallwood, and I definitely want to put him in the list as well. Oops, I do believe I did not take that link for the Newfoundland National Commission. I did not. Give me just a moment. Actually, rather than waste your time and mine on this, I will instead sign off now. So let me just bring my beautiful, beautiful face back. Hi. So I do want to thank you guys for being here. Do please like, share, subscribe, and comment. I ask an additional favor of any of my viewers who happen to be from Newfoundland. Please make yourselves known in the comments. I know I'm getting good view counts on this, but I really want to know if this particular series, the Terra Nova Tuesdays, if that actually appeals to Newfoundlanders. So if you're watching this and you're in Newfoundland, even if you haven't subscribed, at the very least, please leave a comment letting me know that you are either from or in Newfoundland. Okay? Other than that, folks, I hope you're having good days. Hope you continue to have good days. And rise again until lambs become lions. Bye-bye.